Welcome to my house.
Greetings, and welcome back to the House of BTS, the house that goes beyond the supernatural. I am your host, Stephen Dawes. In this video, I'm going into anecdote mode as I want to tell you about an experience I've had with playing a video game recently. And this anecdote hopefully will serve as a teaching tool for any of you new GMs watching this video, as well as reminding the older, more grizzled GMs like myself about what not to do while designing and describing a scene to your players. In particular, I'm going to be going over notes and thoughts about using lighting and light sources in your game. First off, this video was inspired by my acquiring a new PC last week. My previous PC was nearly 10 years old and was about to give up its ghost. So it was time to get a new one, and while doing so, I also picked up a better quality microphone so that you can hear the sultry sound of my voice with better clarity. The camera, however, is the same camera because, as you can tell, I have a face that was made for radio. But anyway, so while getting the PC set up and I was installing the microphone here today, I was reminded of a video game that I started playing last week where sound is actually a pretty important part of the game. I won't say what this game is, as I don't want to potentially cause any spoilers for those who haven't played it yet, even though everything I talk about happens pretty early on in the game. I'll just, if you know what I'm talking about, then great. If not, big surprise for you in store should you ever play it. But the whole angle in this is that the game is set in 1898, and it was before the advent of flashlights and whatnot, and it's a first-person survival horror game. It's got a really good gothic setting and ambiance to it. Sound is of particular importance to the game because the enemies, I'm not sure if they're enemies or monsters or altered humans or what, but all of the enemies, basically, they have burlap bags over their heads, and they can't see. However, they have really good hearing, and that's how they look for you, or that's how they seek out your character, by following the sounds they make. So it's of a particular importance that your character is moving slowly and not trying to make noise. And while it's not specified, at least at this point, if your character is asthmatic or not, but he may as well be, because there's this clever mechanic that if the room is particularly dusty, or if the character's walking by a bonfire, or anything that could do so, basically sends him into coughing fits, which is a dead giveaway to any of the enemies looking for him. And the only way to really, I guess, protect yourself is when you're in those dangerous situations. One of the few mechanics you have in the game for protection is that you cover your mouth and basically hold your you try to hold your breath for a while, long enough for the being to go past you and not realize it's where you're at. Now, all of that's working really great, but in the point of where I'm getting at with lighting is that the setting of this game takes place on this island, and as near as I can tell, you're pretty much the only survivor or human, or you're on your own. And as all the enemies are blind, in the beginning the game starts in a hotel and all the lighting and such for it is on, which is fine, that makes perfect sense. But shortly after you get into the game, it is nighttime, you'll find yourself outside as well as in underground tunnels and such. And I kept getting taken out of the vibe of the game because whoever designed the game did not take into account the fact that there are candles and fires and such lit everywhere outdoors, which basically is the lighting sources that your character goes by. Now, the problem with that, and maybe this is for all the years of me being a GM, but as I think about the whole looking at this from a design perspective, I kept getting taken out of the game because, for lack of a better term, you are the only person on this island that would even use these light sources. Everyone else is blind. So therefore, who is the one lighting all these candles? Who's the one who set all these fires? Who's the one who lit all these lanterns, in the underground caverns and whatnot? It doesn't make sense. Had I had been designing this game or whatever, my advice to this would be, even if the character had gone as far as to be holding like a lit torch or just a log that's on fire on one end or whatever, that would have actually served the game a lot better, because it would make sense that he's the only one who needs the light source, and because a lit, or even holding lanterns or whatever the case would be, they're holding it and carrying it and, trying to keep it alight or such would work a lot better than basically providing all these light sources for the player as you go along. It starts feeling more like the game is on, I guess basically the game almost feels more like it's on rails as opposed to being built around the horror of that this particular character is going through. And this is this is kind of a sidestep too, but you've probably seen it in the creature feature source book. I talk about this. I also talk about it on the house website. I do a lot of pre-planning, and I try to put a lot of pre-thought into the scenes that I create for my games. In particular, lighting is one of those things I really get into. And when I go into a scene or a new room or new setting or whatever, I try to come up with about a paragraph's worth of info to describe the setting. And one of the things that I've always made it a point to try to mention is how the lighting situations is. And this also makes sense from the standpoint of perception rolls. I think it's page 170 of BTS, or the BTS second edition book. There are perception rolls that even mention about, how, depending on how much light you have, for one reason or another, it can actually affect, what your perception rolls are. If you have to be skulking around in the darkness for one reason or another, it's particularly hard looking for something. If all you have is, say, like a miniature flashlight, or even just the ambient light of the room is all you've got to work with. Or also in my games, monsters, and particularly clever monsters that are, I guess, light sensitive or don't care for light, such as like the bogeymen, dimensional ghouls and such, that do not like bright light sources, in particular sunlight. One of the things that I do as a GM, they love targeting and going after the light sources that the player characters are using. Yeah, and this also works, for some mages, cultists, monsters, and such also understand how important light is to a player character, and taking away the light sources or affecting them, whether it's through like an electrostatic burst, specifically targeting and clawing, at a flashlight in a person's hand. In fact, I even use that example in the creature feature book. Of a scene where I did this once, and it worked out great. Characters being left in pitch blackness is a particularly scary thing. And it only adds to the ambiance. So if you have a room that has that's already pre-lit, or if you're out in the woods or whatever where you're seeing bonfires, or there's candles or lanterns or being lit, you really want to take a moment and think about the fact that somebody had to have lit these up, or is currently using them in some shape or another. If all the lighting if the lighting is off, it should be a symbol of either whomever shut everything off before they left, or it hasn't been used for a while. Tools like this are a really good way, especially in my experience, to help tip off the players how often a room's being used, if it's being used at all, if a candle's been lit on a table, it means somebody's been there recently, or might even still be there in the adjoining room. These are it is an investigative game. So putting a little thought into these things and adding the notes into your pre-planning, because again, I will always encourage you to at least pre-plan a little before each game, just make sure your thoughts are in order. Light sources are of particular use in helping setting a scene, as well as, again, you can use it for a lot of purposes of the horror and the suspense of a particular setting that you're in. It also gives opportunity. There are some psychics who have abilities like night sight, or the ghost hunter, night hunter, also happens to have their ghost goggles that work as passive night goggles and such. So being setting them into darkness can be opportunities for the characters to use the special tools or psychic abilities and such that they have available to them, and gives them an opportunity to see just how they use them. Which in my book, that's worth experience points as well, watching the characters make use of what they got and how they use it. from there, there's also one other quick anecdote I want to add to this, and this is going way back into probably like decades for me. Early on in a Rifts game, I was a player at this particular setting. I was not the GM, but I recall that the GM was pretty new himself. And one of the things that they did, we were going into an underground tunnel. And it actually had, as the GM described it, there were like these glowing crystalline structures that were placed on the walls about every 50 feet or whatever, and that in of itself probably would have been fine, but he kind of got a little overzealous and really going into detail on these light sources. So basically, and I think I and all the other players around me kind of picked up that when he was mentioning all of this so much, that that these light sources must have had something of particular importance to him. So we started asking all sorts of questions about these light sources, like, well, what are the dimensions? What do you think I can pull one of these off the wall? Or we just started really the whole game basically went on to like a 4 or 5 minute foray into these light sources, where the GM finally had to say, all right, everybody, just so you know, these are just light sources. They are powered by magic, designed to light up the tunnels. There's nothing more special about them. And we were fine with that, but that's one of my takeaways with that is always to bring up, if I overdo something, I've been as far as say, all right, everyone, take a pause for a second. This is my fault. I'm leading you somewhere I didn't mean to. Realistically, this is what's going on here. Take it at that. And it also is one of those things that kind of helped me go into thinking about, again, when I'm describing a scene, or when I'm even designing what's in the scene, what are the light sources, what are things, there are sounds that they might be hearing in this room, what are some of the objects in this room that would have reason to be there, because again, things that either stand out or are stressed a lot are usually signals to the gamers, or your players, that you're trying to either lead them somewhere or you're not, and they may end up again, they stop following the adventure and they start fascinating on the object you ended up over describing. Sometimes, and again, like I said, I try not to do more than like a paragraph of information, but I will also pepper in additional details as players ask questions about what's going on in that particular room or setting. Again, I try to provide enough that they have something to work with, but not so much that they start obsessing over the details. And so there you have it. I encourage you, through my anecdote, think about what you're doing with your scenes, in particular, the lighting and the light sources being used in a given setting. In BTS, that is a particular use and interest. And I hope I hope that is your takeaway for this video. And with that, I thank you for stopping by the House of BTS today, and I will see you next time.